Hello, my name is Andrea Dermody, Programme Director for Balance for Better Business, and thank you for joining us this morning for the launch of the fourth Balance for Better Business report. A couple of housekeeping issues before we get started. We will be recording today's event and it will be available later on our website for you to review. And we would also like to hear from you during our event today. Please use the Q&A function on your screen to submit your questions and comments, and we'll come to them later on in the event. Later, we'll hear from Aongus Hegarty, one of the co-chairs of Balance for Better Business. But first, to get us started today, I'm handing over to Julie Sinnamon, one of the other of our co-chairs, to kick off our proceedings. Julie.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted to be here to launch the fourth report for Balance for Better Business. And as it might be the fourth report, it's actually the first report for Aongus and I since we took over earlier this year as co-chairs from the founding co-chairs, Breed Horan and Gary Kennedy, who did a massive job in terms of putting the organisation on a strong footing. So I'd like to take this opportunity this morning to thank Breed and Gary for all that they did in terms of establishing Balance for Better Business. And Anne-Marie Taylor was working with them along the way and did a sterling job. So thanks to all of you. So I suppose this morning it's worth reflecting before we go into the results. Why is it important? Does it really matter? And you know, there's a strong body of evidence which has been there for many years from people like McKinsey, from PwC, most recently from the London Business School, pointing to the strong impact in terms of financial performance, return on equity, EBITDA, and particularly the London Business School is pointing to that longer term impact over the next 3 to 5 years when there is greater gender diversity. And not only that, but actually from an equity point of view, it's a very valid and noble thing to be progressing as well. Since Balance for Better Business was established in 2018, we have advocated a voluntary, target-driven approach to trying to improve the level of gender representation at the boardroom table and at senior leadership levels within businesses in Ireland. And this is something that we will see later this morning, how we're progressing against those voluntary targets. We will also hear from a couple of exemplars, Anne O'Leary from Vodafone Ireland and Anne Hegarty from CPL, two people who don't need much introduction to this audience this morning, but they're going to share with us what they have been doing because they've been on this journey for quite a considerable time, but what has worked for their organisations, which they believe might be useful for others who are earlier on in that journey. But first of all, we're going to hear from the Tánaiste and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment. The Tánaiste has been long a champion of Balance for Better Business since we were established in 2018. And it is a great pleasure for me this morning to welcome the Tánaiste to address us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Julie and Aongus for inviting me to speak to you today at the launch of the fourth annual report of the Balance for Better Business Review Group. Gender balance in the workplace is something I've been engaged in for many years as Taoiseach and now as Tánaiste and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, and I'm pleased to support this work. I launched the Balance for Better Business in 2018 to ensure more women are represented on the boards and senior leadership teams of companies in Ireland. That's not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because of the strong business case for doing so. As women represent half the population and therefore half of the talent, it makes sense to get gender equality right. The benefits of more diverse leadership teams in business are well established. We know that companies with higher levels of gender and ethnic diversity on their boards and senior leadership teams result in better economic performance. Increasing employment and leadership opportunities for women is shown to improve organisational effectiveness and growth within firms. These firms demonstrate greater creativity and innovation, they display a better ability to attract and retain talent, and they generally benefit from an enhanced company reputation. Research from the IMI indicates that organisations with inclusive cultures are 3 times more likely to be high performing and 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. The 4th annual report of the Balance for Better Business Review Group reveals some encouraging signs. This year, for the first time, more than 30% of directors in ISAC 20 companies are women, up from 18% in 2018, and exceeding the 21 target of 27%. This is a significant achievement in a short space of time, but clearly more needs to be done. For example, there are still 5 listed companies with all male boards, and women are still underrepresented in executive director roles. Only 1 in 5 leadership positions in listed companies is held by a woman. Change takes time, but the progress at board level shows what can be achieved when companies focus on making change happen. I'm pleased that the work of the Balance for Better Business Group is now under the auspices of my department, and I hope this will create stronger links with business, including through the enterprise agencies, to drive increased participation by women on boards and senior leadership teams. This work will also be supported by Enterprise Ireland's Action Plan for Women in Business. The Action Plan aims to increase the number of women in middle and senior management in Irish companies, as well as increasing the number of women entrepreneurs and women-led high-potential startups. Enterprise Ireland has just launched the Level project. This highlights how enhancing the gender balance of senior teams can build stronger leadership, attract talent, and improve overall performance. The online action planning toolkit will help companies to assess their own position under 6 themes and put measures in place to help improve gender balance within their own senior teams. This report has been prepared in the context of another year of uncertainty brought about by COVID-19. The pandemic has affected us all, and we know women have been impacted by the pandemic in different ways to men. More men have died than women, and men are more likely to require hospitalisation due to severe illness. But the IMF, for example, has indicated that women with small children have been the worst affected in other ways, given that caring responsibilities fall disproportionately on women when compared with men. And women tend to be overrepresented in many of the hardest hit industries, such as hospitality and retail, but also in areas that have been protected, like healthcare, education, and the public service. We must ensure that this is not forgotten, as we build on the work that had been underway by government before the pandemic to ensure women's full and equal representation in the labour market. The programme for government commits to securing higher participation by women in the workplace, as well as acting on the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly on gender equality. We want to ensure equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making, in the workplace, in politics, and in civic society. This is going to require a sustained focus over the years to come, and we're making progress, but still have far to go. Organisations need to pay attention not only to progression within their companies, but also the types of roles that women are progressing into. We need to see women in more revenue-generating roles if we are to see a significant change in the gender pay gap. In the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, we're working to ensure that there's a pandemic dividend in the form of Ireland's first ever statutory sick pay regime, a living wage for Ireland, and a new framework for flexible and remote working. We don't have to return to the old ways of doing things. We can progress work practices that support all underrepresented groups, including women, and make lasting positive changes for the future. We need a pipeline of talent in companies so that more diverse leadership teams and boards are possible. Young women and girls must be able to believe that they can be the business leaders of tomorrow, and it's our collective responsibility to make sure that this is the case. And I know that you'll all want to help make that happen. Finally, I'd like to thank both Julie and Aongus for their hard work and the efforts they've made co-chairing the Balance for Better Business Review Group. And I'd like to thank Andrea Dermody, who's recently taken up the role of Programme Director for the initiative, who's done phenomenal work preparing the report published today. I think you'll all agree that it is an excellent and valuable publication and one that we're going to build on. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you next year, if not sooner.
Thank you, Tánaiste, for that address, and thank you in particular for your ongoing support for Balance for Better Business. It certainly makes a big difference for us to have the support of the Tánaiste at the Cabinet table and in his role as Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment. So we really appreciate that support. And now let's look at the results for this year. Firstly, I think we should say we are heading in the right direction. We're seeing progress against all the key indicators that we track on an annual basis. The level of female participation, we're seeing progress at both the executive level and at the board level. A key target that we set in 2018 was to achieve 30% representation of females at the ISAC 20 level. The good news is we have exceeded that target a year early. So we're at 31%, and that is an absolutely fantastic result. This was really achieved through the level of appointments in 2021. 41% of all appointments to boards of the listed companies in total, all of the listed companies were female. When we look at the large Irish-owned private companies, 31% of all of the appointments were female. So those are two indicators which give us great confidence that we're making progress and that the message is getting through. When we look at the performance of the ISAC 20, we see that we've gone from 18% in 2018 to 31% in 2021, 13-point change over the 3 years that we've been tracking these figures. That's an absolutely fantastic result, and something which I think we should take time today to celebrate and acknowledge. It is really the type of progress that we probably hoped for but didn't think was possible 3 years ago. So a fantastic result. We then look at the level of representation on the other listed companies, 20%. Now, just to remind you, in 2018, that was 9.6%. So that level of representation has more than doubled over the 3 years that we've been tracking these figures. And then finally, on the large Irish-owned private companies, 22%, we've narrowly missed that target, which was set in 2018, a 23% target, we're in 22%. So overall, looking at the level of female participation on boards, where we see progress against all of them. 2 out of the 3 targets met, 1 substantially exceeded, which is fantastic. And, you know, I suppose the key focus now for us is to cascade this. When you add all of these companies up, it's still a relatively small base of companies relative to the total base in Ireland. And I think one of the key areas of focus now has to be to cascade this down to a much wider group of companies. So if we look at the representation on the leadership teams, firstly, for the ISAC 20, we have hit 25%. That's against a target of 23%, which was set in 2018. So we've exceeded the target. We're in good shape. The other listed companies, the large Irish-owned and the multinationals, each of those 3 groupings have missed the target. They've all made progress. And, you know, multinationals have been at this for a considerable time. They narrowly missed the 33% target, which was an ambitious target, but they're 32%. But at least all of them are trending in the right direction. This is slower progress. Having said that, we recognize this is not a quick fix. This requires building pipelines, working on initiatives to develop the succession planning coming through, learning from others that are further along this journey. So it's a slow burn. We are seeing progress, and it's something that I think we need to continue to accelerate the rate of progress in this regard. But we still have some areas that we need to increase the focus. 1/3 of all listed companies and 1/5 of all of the large Irish-owned private companies have all male leadership teams. 5 of the listed companies have still got all male boards. In fact, one of them has now added a female since we collected this data, so it's 4. But as at this date, 1st of September, it's 5 of the listed companies have still all male boards. So we need to continue to work in that regard. And it isn't just about participation on the board. We need to increase the number of women in key decision-making positions on those boards. And, you know, if we look at the numbers of chairs, for example, 10.8% of the chairs of all of the listed companies and 13.7% of the chairs of the large Irish private companies are female. So we still have a way to go in those positions on audit committees and, you know, chairing the various subcommittees of boards as well as the chairs of boards. But at least we're seeing real progress on the level of participation at board level. Another a bit of positive news is that boards are now more likely to have 3 or more women on their boards. And, you know, there is a critical figure of trying to get not just a single female voice on boards, but a sufficiently sound voice. Internationally, that's seen to be 40%. We have seen that 42% of listed companies have now 3 or more females. And if we go back to 2018, that was 25%. So again, we are seeing that we're making good progress. So that's what the Irish scene looks like. Now we're going to turn to the international dimension to see how that compares. And the good news is you can see that gap is narrowing considerably. BoardX are an organisation that collect this data on positions on boards and senior leadership positions for the larger companies internationally. They have singled out Ireland this year as the country that has made the largest percentage point gain over the 6-year period that they've been collecting data. In this case, the level of participation of women on the ISEC 20 has more than doubled over this 6-year period. That's an absolutely fantastic result. It's something, again, that we should acknowledge and celebrate. So it does give us great confidence that when you put a focus on something and work out what needs to happen to make it happen, it's possible to make progress. So in conclusion, if we look at where we're standing overall, I think there are 3 things we should recognise. Number one, we are seeing progress across the data, trending upwards on all of the metrics that we are tracking. Secondly, the progress is more significant at the board level, with that ISEC 20 figure going a fantastic increase of 13 points from 18 up to 31 over the 3 years that we've been tracking. The success at leadership level, it does take more time. It's slower. It's something which, companies are slower on that journey, and we want to be able to use the expertise around this table and other expertise in order to support companies on that journey. Later, Aongus is going to talk to you about the top recommendations from Balance for Better Business in order to help companies take the steps they need to take in order to make progress. However, rather than just hearing from us, it's always good to hear from people who have done it, exemplars. And earlier last week, Aongus met with Anne Hegarty, somebody who needs no introduction to this table. And Anne talked to Aongus about what she had led in CPL in order to increase the level of participation of females, both in their leadership team and at the board table. So let's hear from Aongus and Anne Hegarty. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be joined here today by Anne Hegarty, CEO of CPL. Anne, thank you so much for joining me today. Maybe you could share a little bit with us around the practical steps that you and the team have gone through to achieve those levels of representation.
From a practical point of view, I really believe it needs to start at the top. If it's not obvious that the CEO, the chairman, and the board really understand the importance of gender balance in terms of driving business performance, well, then it's not going to happen. So I suppose we've been very fortunate in CPL that I've worked with the chairman and with the board who are really strong advocates of gender balance, not just at board level, but right across the organisation in terms of succession planning at all levels, of leadership and management. Another practical step, and something that has worked very well for us, is our promotion moderation process. And we always have a gender balanced interview panel as part of our promotion process. And of course, we also insist that female candidates are brought forward for promotion. Then with that, we mirror that similar process in terms of our own hiring activity when we're looking outside the organization to hire talent into the organization. And that has really worked well for us. A third thing that I think is important is that whole area of building an inclusive culture. So I think CPL, and certainly all the feedback we get from our people, is that there's a strong belief that we have built a really inclusive culture. And we do quite a lot of training for our leadership and management in terms of fostering inclusivity in a way that also drives high performance. So that has certainly been really good for us. And the fourth thing I would say is that it's important to celebrate those role models within the organization who are successful. And that's very much that whole concept of if you can't see it, you can't be it. And certainly from a CPL perspective, we were fortunate that early on we had some fantastic females within the organization who were then promoted and became great role models for others.
Externally, CPL has won a number of awards. You mentioned the Best Workplace for Women in 2021, and I know several others as well too. Looking at that and the enhancement of your brand, do you see a link between gender balance and business impact?
I certainly do see a significant impact between gender balance and the business impact. So, for example, our results as a company are very strong. I think one of the reasons for that is because we have an inclusive culture. It's a place where people like to come and work. And I think the gender balance there is very important. I think also too, our gender balance has probably helped us to keep our focus on productivity and results.
Finally, if you had one takeaway message for business leaders out there who are focused around gender balance and diversity, what would that key takeaway be?
I would say build your succession plan, build your gender balanced leadership pipeline. I think is vital for the future of organizations. And I think particularly now where there's a real understanding that it is people who drive business performance. I think using all your resources and particularly looking right across your organization, both internally and externally, and getting that gender balance right is vital for the success of all our organizations.
And thank you so much indeed. They're fantastic insights you've shared with us today. Thank you for your leadership in this whole area of balance for better business and gender diversity. Thank you. Good morning. I'm delighted to be with you. And it's great to hear from an inspiring leader like Anne Hegarty. I know Anne and her team have worked exceptionally hard to build a diverse and inclusive culture at CPL. Thank you, Anne, for your contribution and for sharing your experience at CPL in our report. The key messages I took from the video discussion with Anne were that gender-balanced interview boards have facilitated better female representation in both leadership and management at CPL. Training for all people managers has helped to build an inclusive environment that fosters high performance. And clear goals created an inclusive culture at CPL. We all know that diversity with an inclusive culture is the magic sauce for success. Network groups and sharing personal stories have encouraged women to progress their careers at CPL. So let's take a look at our top recommendations from the Balance for Better Business report. The report includes extensive recommendations, and here I want to focus on the top 3 things to encourage all CEOs and chairs to take action. First of all, plan to set targets and achieve them by having an action plan. Setting targets for your business is an indicator of intent. It demonstrates to employees, to customers, to stakeholders that achieving greater balance is a priority for the business, a priority on the same level as sales, revenue, or expense rationalization. Develop a plan like you would for any other business target. Establish where you are now, and set aspirations for where you would like to be 1, 2, 3 years out. Link the plan to your business strategy. We know that gender balanced teams and organizations yield better outcomes for your business and can help to achieve goals to drive innovation, collaboration, and risk awareness. Set metrics to measure progress and establish accountability for senior executives across the business. There's help available from many organizations supporting gender balance, such as the 30% Club, who've provided toolkits, training candidates for board positions, and providing a source of female candidates for board level positions. The Level Project, recently launched by Enterprise Ireland, is specifically designed to support SMEs to drive gender balance. Organizations and businesses should leverage these tools and learn from other companies to help make progress. The second key thing and call to action is to act to build a gender balanced succession plan. Key is developing the talent. Succession planning is an important part of talent management process. Having a medium to long-term succession plan, which is gender balanced, is going to drive the ultimate success and sustainability of progress. It provides a way to ensure that a diverse pool of candidates with the right skills are available when leadership positions become available. Recent research by the Institute of Directors highlighted that 58% of Irish board directors said their organization had a succession plan in place for their board. This is a risk which organizations should not take. It's important that boards and leadership teams have a strong succession plan in place, focus on a pipeline of talent coming up through their organizations. There are some steps listed in the report which highlight how this can be achieved. For example, gender balanced interview slates, interview panels, and promotion lists. Only by having a strong pipeline of diverse talent will we drive sustainable progress and ensure we have the right female talent for the most senior positions in companies. Finally, we want to report on this for transparency and accountability, because transparency and accountability build trust. There's never been a better time to be transparent about our diversity data, to hold ourselves accountable for the progress we seek to make in diversity and inclusion. By collecting and analysing the data on diversity over time, comparing those numbers to the numbers at other organisations and sharing them with stakeholders, companies can increase accountability and about their and highlight their diversity issues that they're working on. It's what our employees, our investors, our customers, and our stakeholders expect from us. Your position as a company on diversity and inclusion is continuing to become far more transparent to those in the labour market. So addressing your diversity challenge, stating your targets, and progress publicly updating sends a clear message that you value a diverse workforce. Accountability must be led from the top of an organisation. So let's hear from one of the leaders who has clearly done this at Vodafone, their Ireland CEO, Anne O'Leary.
I'm joined here today by Anne O'Leary of Vodafone Ireland. And one of the big issues many companies have told us is getting started and what to do to start this journey. So Anne, maybe I'll ask you to kick off by talking to us about what you have done in Vodafone in order to increase the level of representation of women in your leadership team.
Thanks, Julie. Delighted to speak to you today. I suppose at Vodafone, we know and understand what it comes to in terms of gender equality and creating a truly inclusive culture by doing two things: behaviours that are free of biases and business structures and processes and policies that create equality. As you know, we have 56% female at senior management level and 53% female at leadership level, and we're really proud of that. And I suppose there's 5 things that we've really focused on: continuous focus on female succession, creating equal opportunities in the talent pipeline, upskilling all our people leaders to be truly inclusive, implementing really good family-friendly policies, and of course, challenging our end-to-end experience to ensure it's free of biases.
And can you talk to me, Anne, about why this balanced representation was more important and is more important for Vodafone Ireland?
Look, all I can say is our superior business performance is because of our balance within our leadership team within Vodafone Ireland. And the first balance you have to have is gender. Obviously, you have a diverse range of capabilities. We have accountants, we have technologists, we have marketeers, we have legal. We were all comfortable with that around the table. But actually, all the data shows that boards and leadership teams with gender diversity produce better business results. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we need to represent our customer base. And our customer base are 50-50 male and female. We sell to females, to families. We deliver connectivity for a range of businesses and consumers. So that's absolutely key. So, and then of course, I have other diversity of nationality. I have LGBT. I have ability as well. But we have proven that at all times, the different views and the different perspectives that we get by having strong gender diversity has been crucial, and has been even more crucial probably at pivotal times when sometimes I've been that lone voice. I mean, you talked about, Julie, back then when we were the only people in the room and you wondered about your opinion and was it right? And actually it was. You just have a different perspective. So also, I think you can do good and do good business, and also equity and fairness in the world is important as well. And I think we have to have the representation of the population of the world in our business.
Did you face any major challenges in driving this agenda? And if so, what were those challenges?
It is tough because you have to measure everything. You have to set goals and targets. You have to keep questioning and ensuring that you are doing the right thing, and that every manager is focused on the same outcomes. And you're rewarding managers not just on revenue, profitability and cash, but also on things like diversity and inclusion in their team, because otherwise it doesn't happen. I'm not saying people don't mean it. We hear an excuse that I can't find the talent. The fact is they are there. I can prove, and I've proven, that it can be done, they can be found, and you can have a successful business. So I would encourage all business leaders to do that, Julie.
If you'd one bit of advice to give as to what companies should do to start this journey, what would it be?
I think if you haven't started, I think now is the opportunity to create the future of the workplace. And if you think about it, it's not fixed on location anymore, it's fixed on people. So there's never been a more important time to think about creating an inclusive environment, an environment that can remove any barriers to inequality, and that everybody has an opportunity to reach their full potential in your company. So I would say to them to make it a personal goal for you as a leader to do what you can. And it is about policies, structures, procedures that you can put in place that can measure with goals, etc. But also it is about training and awareness, and about culture, about what is the organization of the future that you want to leave. And I suppose that was something that somebody did say to me when I took over as CEO of Vodafone nearly 9 years ago, is when you look back, some people said to me, I didn't do enough when I could. So I'd say to them, now is the chance. Go for it. Set your goals, set your targets. We're all here to help and support each other. And I think it can be done. And you will also, I think, produce a very successful business as well.
Really inspirational words there from Anne O'Leary of Vodafone. So now it's time for our questions and answers session. And as a reminder, at the bottom of your screen, you should have access to a Q&A function. Do feel free to put in your questions or your comments, and we'll come to them over the course of the next 10 or so minutes. But I'm going to start with a question to both of you, Julie and Angus. You both have very different perspectives and experiences to draw on from a career perspective. Can you share your personal perspective on why gender balance is important for strong business outcomes?
Okay, so if I go back, Andrea, to my time in Enterprise Ireland, one of the big issues we were working on was trying to increase the number of entrepreneurs, and only 7% of our technology entrepreneurs back in 2011 were female. So we started working on each of the issues impacting on it, from lack of role models, access to finance, confidence, etc., etc. And the good news is, by 2020, when we were reporting, we were at 24%. Now, that didn't mean we stopped supporting male entrepreneurs. We just grew the pool. And what we were trying to do, have a greater number of successful, strong companies each year. The international figure is still 8%. It was 8% in 2011. It's still 8%. So what we discovered was, by addressing the issues, we were able to make progress. When I talk to every company, probably the biggest issue that they're facing is access to talent. And yet we have an underrepresentation and an underutilization of all the great female talent in organizations. So I think in terms of helping companies, we know it impacts on the whole level of innovation and creativity and the financial performance of them. And it is something which increasingly younger people are looking at when they're deciding whether to join a company or not join a company. How would I fit into that company? What are their policies on diversity and inclusion? And so it's no longer a nice to have. It's critical for companies, both in terms of their performance and in their talent attraction and retention.
Thanks, Julie.
From my perspective, to share and add to Julie's thoughts, my personal perspective is, more than a decade ago, I took leadership of our Europe, Middle East and Africa business for Dell Technologies. And at that time, I assembled the strongest leadership team, picking the best people for each of those roles. But I was quite shocked when I stood back and looked at the significant lack of gender diversity at the leadership level in my new team. And that started me on a journey to understand why was that. And over the subsequent years, identifying, setting targets, working on succession planning. And over the subsequent years, we brought that up to 40% female representation on the leadership team. I think clearly through that period, what I saw were the significant benefits that came from that. Very strong business outcomes for our European business over that period. I would say a greater level of innovation took place within our teams. Because we coupled it with an inclusive culture within the company and within the team, we drew on that broad set of diversities and experiences that comes with a gender and other lenses of diversity in your leadership organization. Strong financial returns, good performance in many areas around organization. And in more recent years, I would say around our focus and emphasis around the environment as well too. It allows you to focus on things and issues and challenges from different angles, rather than having all of the same people with the same ideas and answers in the room. Having a variety of ideas, thoughts and input allows you to create much better business decisions, much better business outcomes.
It's a good point. Where does the new idea come from, Aongus, if it's all the same backgrounds and experiences around the table? And the clear message coming through for me is that progress is possible. You've both shared examples there of where changes happened, and we can see that in the examples we have in the report and indeed in the progress on the ISAC 20. But Julie, if I can come back to you, I mean, there are literally hundreds of things that companies could be doing to drive gender balance. We've spoken about some of them, but what additional advice would you give companies that are getting started on this journey and are looking at where to begin?
Yeah, well, firstly, what I'd say to them is, don't try to reinvent wheels. I mean, we've heard today from two great exemplars, Anne O'Leary and Anne Hegarty. Nearly going to say Anne Hegarty there, Angus. So we've heard from two great exemplars, and people who have gone on this journey see the business benefits as well, and they are very happy to share their experience. And I think that's one of the things that going forward, we want to increase the level of sharing and case studies that we can bring to companies that are very early in this journey in order to help them to accelerate and not to just to learn from the vast body of experience that's there. There are loads of supports available. Aongus touched on the Level programme from Enterprise Ireland. In our report, we've also the 30% Club toolkit. So there are lots of ways of supporting you. And Aongus has talked as well about, the 3 things that you should do in terms of setting metrics and putting in place plans and actions that you would for any other business initiative. So I would say go to people, avail of the supports that are available and get started.
The only other point I would add to that as well too is it must be led from the top of the organization. That's really, really key. You could see in both video pieces with both ends that they led it as CEOs of their companies and organizations. It's critical. It's the same for Dell Technologies. It's led from the very top from Michael Dell. And that's absolutely critical in the organization. It must be the leadership from the chair or leadership from the CEO.
Very good advice. I think as well, when we think about where you can go to get help, we've mentioned the Level project from Enterprise Ireland. And if people wanted to access that, it's at levelproject.ie, a great toolkit and resource for people. And that was built on the 30% Club toolkit, of course, as well. And the 30% Club have done a lot of work on executive search code. One of the questions that has been submitted is asking, do you feel that executive search firms are doing enough to deliver diversity in the delivery of senior executive searches and board level searches? And while we're thinking about that, I'd echo back to a stat that you used earlier on, Aongus, which told us from the Institute of Directors that only 58% of board members reported that they had succession plans. There's definitely a role there. So what are your thoughts on that piece?
If I start, Julie, maybe you can add. I would say that, all of the work that we've done within the Balance for Better Business has been bringing groups together across industry and business in Ireland. And I think that the search companies, the talent companies absolutely have a key part to play. And we've certainly reached out and connected with a number of them to ensure that they are putting that emphasis and focus on it. But I think also it's important within companies themselves, where a lot of the searching and activity is now done from within the company, that the TA team inside your company, if it's a larger company, is clearly laying out that criteria to ensure that it's a diverse slate of candidates that is being brought forward, so that anyone hiring from outside within your company has the opportunity to look at a diverse slate of candidates and then pick the best person for the role. So absolutely critical, I think, with all of us having key roles to play, including the search companies that you highlighted, Andrea, as well.
I think one of the things I would add to that is if a search company is aware that the company that this is really mission critical, that they're not prepared to accept a slate which is not diverse, then they will respond accordingly. And in some cases, I've been involved with search companies and it hasn't been as clear to them, and they will come up with maybe 80-20 or 90-10 or even no females on the slate. So I think it's up to the companies that are paying the bill for these search companies to make it absolutely clear from the start that they want to see a diverse slate. They then will make the best appointment for the role. But if you don't have a diverse slate, there is no chance of us achieving the types of diverse appointments that we need going forward. So I think the company recruiting, the executive search company is the key here in terms of making it absolutely clear that it is not acceptable to give a slate that isn't diverse.
It comes back to this issue again that we've been talking about tone from the top and commitment at the top of an organisation. And I think especially coming back to the point around pipeline, the CSO survey earlier this year told us that most senior level positions, 2/3 of them, are actually filled from inside organisations So if companies are not proactively working on that pipeline over the long term, they're not going to achieve that sustainable gender balance that we've been talking about. But coming back to the board level, Julie, we've talked about that building gender balanced leadership team takes focus on the pipeline and on succession planning. What type of things have we seen boards do that are most impactful in terms of shifting that overall representation?
Well, firstly, a lot of companies, when they're going out to look for new board directors, will actually go out to executive search companies, and they will look for a good group of candidates. So firstly, they can look for diversity in that and insist on diversity. One of the other issues that we would have heard over the last couple of years was, well, we have got, the tenure of some of the board members is so long that it's going to take us years to get to where we want to get to. Well, this year, if you take of the listed companies that increased their female participation, and those figures were very impressive, with 41% of those appointments being female. But in 10 of those cases, the appointments were additional board members. And I think increasingly the companies have recognised that this will take forever unless they add that diversity in the short term. And there's no reason why you can't increase the number of directors in order to increase your diversity if you have issues with regard to tenure. And you know what? When you do that, you're going to realise there's a different quality of conversation, that it's much more representative of the client base that you're trying to serve, and that you're bringing a different perspective. And there's no right or wrong perspective. It is the richness is in the diversity.
I think it comes back to a point that Anne O'Leary made as well about intersectionality, and it's not just about, it's about raising gender balance for all women. And not just for one specific type of individual. But I think it does also come to the point around what we're aiming for here is diversity of thought. And the point you made earlier on, Aongus, about inclusion. Diversity is one side of the equation, but you have to have inclusion for it to work. Unfortunately, it's a great discussion. We've run out of time, but I want to ask you one last question, if you don't mind. And this is for both of you. What is the main thing that you want our participants to walk away with today?
Julie?
Well, I would say, first of all, is a sense of urgency, that we really need to make progress in this. And I would like to recognise the progress that we have made. But for those that haven't yet started the journey, I'd say there's a sense of urgency. And I'd also like you to walk away with a sense of confidence that we are making progress and that we can make progress in this regard. So to me, it's a sense of urgency and a sense of confidence that it can be done, and also that it's worth doing, because it's going to actually drive business success.
I would just echo that as well too, in pointing out that the significant challenge for many companies is talent, retaining talent and attracting talent. If you haven't put a focus and an emphasis, to Julie's point, in getting started on this or accelerating it as a priority equal to other business priorities, now is absolutely the time to do it. Because if you don't, I am very, very convinced you will lose more of your talent and you will struggle to attract talent into your organization. It is truly a business imperative.
And I think, echoing some of the comments we've received, it's not just about the data, it's also about the actions that you take, the inputs. And these are the things that are going to drive sustainable change. And the change is possible, but it does take leadership and sustained focus and ongoing monitoring as well. Great interaction from the group today, and lovely to hear the discussion with both of you. I leave it with you to remind us of the key messages and bring it to a close.
I'll start, and Julie, you might bring us home. So I think I'd just like to say once again, I'm delighted to co-chair this initiative on Balance for Better Business. I couldn't have two better partners than Andrea and Julie, and I'm really looking forward to the opportunity in 2022 to work closely with companies across Ireland in really continuing to move forward in our performance here. Diversity and inclusion is something personally I'm very, very passionate about, and I look forward to the opportunity to partner and work with companies across Ireland in really moving forward in 2022 significantly. That said, in summary, I would say we've seen strong progress. Julie walked us through the data and results. We're particularly seeing it strong on the board level, but we have clearly more to do on the leadership teams. And the leadership teams are a key element of driving balance across the organizations and driving that better business performance that we know will come from more gender diverse leadership teams and overall organizations as well as boards. I want to remind you of the three things that we've clearly called out in the session today and are clearly called out in our report. One is to set those targets if you haven't already done that. Build a plan to underpin those targets. If I call out one thing that we see as absolutely critical, and you've heard it from many of the CEOs who've spoken or discussion here on the webinar, it is absolutely about succession planning and pipelining and ensuring that you have a diverse set of talent coming through in the organization and you're attracting into your company. And thirdly, report on it, track progress, and continue to work on improvements in those actions and plans to ensure you hit those targets that you've set going forward over the next 1, 2, or 3 years. Julie, I'll hand over to you to wrap us up.
Okay, and can I bring the proceedings to a close by thanking everybody on the call today for joining us. We really appreciate your support and you taking the time to come on the call. I want to give a particular thanks to Andrea. Since Aongus and I took over mid-year as co-chairs, we saw Anne-Marie Taylor, who had been the previous director, had done a fantastic job, and Andrea came along with the 2 new rookie co-chairs, and she has been a fantastic support. So I'd just like to acknowledge the massive work that she has done over the last few months in terms of guiding us and also delivering a superb report. So, and the event this morning, a lot of work also went in behind the scenes from a large cast. I'm not going to start naming names because if I do, I'll miss somebody really important out. But just, you know who you are. We couldn't have done this without you. So I'd really like to thank everybody who has supported Andrea in terms of the development of the report, the collection of the data, and the event this morning. As the Tánaiste you mentioned, we now are working closely with his department. So I would like to thank Orla Quinn and the team in the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. We can't do this without your support, and it has been extremely free-flowing in terms of supporting us throughout the year, and I look forward to working with you going forward in this regard. And really, you know, while we haven't hit all of the metrics, we are trending in the right direction in all of the 7 data points, particularly well in some of them. So I'd like to thank all of you, the companies who have taken steps in the last year to contribute to the progress that we are making. It is something which I think it's fair to say we all feel very strongly about. So I'd like to thank you for what you have done to drive this agenda. This is about delivering better business performance. It's also about delivering a society for all of us to live in, where the representation at the board table and leadership teams is more reflective of the society that we want to be part of. And to me, that's a noble ambition that we should all aspire to, and we will get there. And the good news is we are making progress. We know we can make it happen. We have seen the progress. That gives us great confidence going forward. So as we close this morning, I would just say, just let's do it. Thank you.